Dad came over to my place with toys for a couple of little kids. I don't have any kids. I'm seeking your help, the sharp minds of Reddit that always find perspectives I miss, because my dad did something totally unexpected yesterday, and I can't make sense of it. I'm trying to figure it out, but nothing really clicks. I'll lay it all out clearly, but my family has enough drama to fill volumes, so I'll be very concise about it. To clarify once more, I do not have kids, and I'm not married. I have never been married, nor have I ever lived with a man. Here's a quick rundown of the people who might somehow be involved. I have one brother, 27, and one sister, 22F. Brother is in a long-term relationship with a lovely woman, but they both aren't interested in kids anytime soon. Sister still lives at our mom's place. No kids, no serious relationship. My parents are divorced, and mom remarried. Dad stayed single. He resides with my uncle, 40s M, and uncle's wife, 40s F. Stepdad is okay. They tied the knot after I had moved out, and sister says they are ordinary and beige together. He has no kids either and has never met my dad, so his side can be ruled out. Here's what went down. I live in a crummy, low-budget apartment about 45 minutes from my dad's place. It's on the 3rd floor, and to get to my door, you need to walk into the building and climb several flights of stairs. Yesterday, around 6 p.m., Dad knocked on my door. I wasn't expecting him, so I was puzzled but happy to see him. I greeted him as usual, and he gave me a side hug since he was holding a few toy boxes. These were Fisher-Price toys meant for very little kids, even babies. I didn't comment on them because I had no reason to think they were for me. I just didn't even register them in my mind. He seemed perfectly normal. He wasn't breathing oddly, wasn't sweaty, his pupils weren't dilated, nothing was off with him visually. When we hugged, I didn't smell anything strange, no alcohol or smoke or anything else, but my face wasn't very close to him. I mentioned I was glad he dropped by but questioned why he was here. He said he was in the area shopping when he saw these toys, which he then proudly showed me, and wanted to give them to the girls. I asked, who? And he gave me 2 names I didn't recognize. I remember mentally sifting through everyone I've ever met in our family, like a Rolodex, and nobody matched. As I'm standing there trying to identify the names, he peeks over my shoulder into the apartment and asks if the kids are here or if they're with Mike. Again, who is that? Apparently, it's my husband. I must have been radiating confusion since now my dad is looking just as confused as I am, but still keeping up a good mood kind of vibe. I tell him I'm not married and have no children. At first, he insisted I did, and when I reiterated that, he just kind of shook his head. At this point, I'm getting really concerned. Is my dad lost? Confused? Is he having some kind of breakdown? I ask my dad if he knows where he is. He starts to get frustrated really quickly and confirms that yes, he knows where he is and who I am. I start to ask him questions that I've seen in movies like, do you know what time it is? Or the year? And he just gets more and more angry. He starts shouting at me right in my face, yelling, you think this is funny? And are you trying to make me look stupid? There are bubbles of spit in the corners of his mouth. He went from 0 to 100 so fast, it genuinely frightened me, so I retreated a bit into my apartment. When I backed away, he took it as a personal offense and started screaming, oh, now you're scared? You're scared of me? Guess I'll just fuck off then. He storms off, literally stomping his feet like a child down the hallway. I thought about chasing him, but he was so furious that I didn't think it was a wise decision. The entire interaction lasted less than 5 minutes. I closed and locked my door and immediately began making phone calls. I called my mom, uncle, and siblings. Nobody had any idea what had just happened. I even asked my mom and sister if I was the crazy one, and if I had children I had forgotten about. They confirmed I certainly didn't. My uncle mentioned that Dad had left the house around 4 p.m. to run errands in my area, so that part was accurate. I told him what happened, and he said he'd try to figure out what was going on and would call with updates. It's now tomorrow morning, and I haven't heard anything back. I spent the entire night trying to figure this out. Here are my theories. He has another child somewhere that none of us know about, and that child is married with 2 kids. But if that's true, why my apartment? Did he confuse me with his other hidden child? He confirmed he knew where he was, so I'm not sure. Did he drive here on autopilot? He would have had to get out of his car and walk all the way up here, which should have given him enough time to snap out of it. The anger might have come from him realizing what he'd done and panicking, but it would have been so easy to fabricate a lie about what happened. He had some kind of mental breakdown. This was my first thought, but he looked and acted so normal. He drove out here, went to a store, and purchased items without any issues, so he must have been in a fairly sound mind to do that. Maybe he was mentally somewhere else? I considered the idea that he might have been in the past and thought I was someone else, but again, he confirmed where he was and who I was, and I didn't recognize any of the names as anyone in our family. He did this intentionally for some reason. I have no clue why he would do this. Drama? Our entire family loves loves to stir the pot, but this is extreme and makes him look bad, which is out of character. If he were to manufacture drama, he'd want to make himself look good. So this would be a drastic switch in his dramatics. Maybe sympathy? Maybe he's going to play this up as some kind of stress breakdown. To my knowledge, his job doesn't stress him heavily. He's had the same role for years and was quite happy with it. The most he complained about was having to work overtime occasionally. He's developing dementia. I know early onset dementia could be the reason, but he's just barely 50. Yeah, he's getting older, but not that old. And he's never shown any signs of cognitive decline up until this exact moment. This is a huge escalation from nothing. If anyone else has any idea what's happening here, please share. Uncle has yet to call me back, and my siblings can't get through to my dad's phone. I think it's dead. I left a voicemail and texts on my uncle's line, but who knows if he's seen them. I don't have any authority in his life. The only one who does is my brother, and he lives in another state, so it's not like he can help much. What the fuck happened to my dad? Update. Hi everyone. I wanted to wait until I had more information to post an update, but many people were seriously worried about my dad and me, so I wanted to let everyone know what happened. I finally found my dad. My uncle took him to the hospital the night of the incident, and was, for reasons I'll get to, ignoring our calls and texts. Anyone who bet on head injury and drugs, you're correct. You can cash out your chips at the front counter, haha. There was no second family. I wish there was. My dad would just be in drama-related trouble and not medical trouble. He's got a massive concussion and serious brain damage. Doctors don't know how he managed to even drive to my apartment safely. They think he was on autopilot since he takes that freeway nearly every day. The phantom kids are his co-workers. His brain somehow blended the details of his co-workers' lives into his own. Co-worker has a daughter who is married and has 2 kids, and the memories of hearing about the girls got mixed up with memories of his own daughter. Doctor says this is pretty common with head injuries. My uncle did locate my dad and take him to the hospital. He drove out to my area and searched the place looking for my dad, and eventually found his car outside Walmart around 10 p.m. Couldn't find him outside, but did find him out behind the building, bothering an employee for a cigarette. He grabbed my dad and kind of dragged him into the car and took him to the hospital. He just decided not to inform anyone because he didn't want to stress us out. I don't believe him at all. I think my uncle is responsible for what happened to my dad and was avoiding us out of guilt. After I posted here, I went to work, and once I was clocked out, I went to my uncle's place. Dad and uncle's cars were gone. Only my aunt's was there. I went and knocked, but nobody answered. People in my last post mentioned carbon monoxide poisoning, and I was kind of freaking out thinking my aunt was just fucking dead inside. So I went around the house testing the doors and windows to see if I could get in. The back door was unlocked, so I just let myself inside and looked around, totally empty. I even checked underneath the beds, since a few people mentioned my dad could be paranoid or scared and hiding. My aunt has this giant purse, and it wasn't there, which confirmed to me that she was probably with my uncle. I went back and sat in my car and started calling hospitals and jails that came up on Google Maps. Nobody had any answers and just said he wasn't there. I even called the cops for a wellness check just to see if maybe they could call around hospitals and get a different answer, but I waited until 11 p.m. and literally nobody showed up. No police, no family, nobody. I drove back home and tried to get some sleep. Next day, I call out of work and spend the day driving around my area trying to locate my dad. Couldn't track him down, so I start calling hospitals again. There are 3 in my area, and while 2 of them said, "No, he's not here, sorry," one of them got really nervous over the phone and said, "I'm not supposed to give out patient information." I got suspicious, kept asking, and she just became more and more flustered. Hung up and drove over there and saw my uncle's car in the parking lot. It was kind of late. The sun was down, but I wasn't keeping track of time, so there were only like 5 cars in the visitor area, and his was one of them. I do not have words to describe what I was feeling, but it was mostly just rage. Like, what the fuck? Hello? He's been here the whole time? I went in and tried to get the receptionist to let me see my dad. She didn't really want to let me, and I'm not proud of it, but I started freaking out. I slammed my hands on the desk, screamed, knocked over a magazine rack. I guess my tantrum made someone go talk to my uncle and aunt since she came out to the waiting room and told the receptionist it was fine to let me through. If she didn't look so tired and sad, I was going to maul her, but the look on her face made me calm down, if you can call it that. Long story short, she took me to my dad's room. He looked terrible. None of you know my dad, but he's a beast. He's 5 feet 11 inches with massive smile lines and bright shining eyes. He's my dad, so I'm biased, but he's always so full of life. Laying in that hospital bed, he looked dead already. Sunken eyes, lifeless and droopy face. He looked empty. I was able to talk to him for a bit, but he was totally out of it. He had to be reminded reminded who I was several times and kept forgetting where he was and why he was here. Just like my dad, when I get upset, I get angry. I practically dragged my uncle out of the room and into the hallway for an explanation. After about 20 minutes of him providing excuses and evading the topic, another reason I think he's guilty, he finally informed me what happened. Apparently, on Monday morning, my dad fell while getting out of his car and hit his head really hard against the driveway. He got up, and everyone thought he was fine, so they just went inside. The house as usual. After a while, he had a headache, so they gave him a couple of prescription painkillers to alleviate the pain. Apparently, that worked, so they just let him go about his day as normal. They only became alarmed when I called and informed my uncle what happened. He kept being so odd and evasive that I know there's more, but I couldn't wring his stupid fucking neck in the hospital hallway, so I just let it go. Here's what I believe happened. I know my uncle and dad, and I know the history of this stupid family like the back of my hands. I think my dad and uncle got into an argument over something, and dad was either pushed down or struck in the head by my uncle. The altercation gets resolved somehow, and they go back to normal, but my dad's head still hurts. I learned at the hospital from the doctor that there were enough painkillers in his system to sedate a horse, so I suspect my aunt and uncle just kept giving him painkillers so they wouldn't need to take my dad to the hospital and admit what they did. I confronted my aunt about the painkillers, and she eventually halfway admitted that they weren't exactly allowed to have them at all. I suspect she bought them from someone else. They're likely addicted, and I just didn't know. I'm almost 100% sure this is their fault. If they had taken my dad to the hospital as soon as he hit his head, he would probably be okay. I'm staying at the hospital now, and my aunt and uncle have left. The doctor says to not get my hopes up about my dad. But when doctors say that, it always means he'll actually be okay, right? That's how it always goes. They tell you that your family member probably won't make it, but they always prove them wrong. I'm sorry, but the rest of this is just going to be venting. You know what really pisses me off? I could handle all this. I could comprehend it. My uncle and aunt have always been less than dependable. I can believe that this could come from them. The hardest part is the lack of concern from literally anyone but me. I had to blackmail my brother, drama from a year ago, to even get him to agree to fly out. My mom doesn't care. Dad's family doesn't care. My sister sort of cares, but she doesn't really want to help or even support me in the hospital with him. I am just so stunned that I'm the only person here for my dad, and he doesn't even know who I am right now. I have to take time off work, but it's not like my job gives me PTO. I'm screwed. My dad is screwed. My life is screwed. Why am I the only one dealing with this? My brother is the only one of us with time and money to assist in fixing this, and I had to threaten him just to get him to come back home. I wish I had chased my dad when he left my apartment. I was scared of him, but I'm even more scared now. My dad is probably going to die, and I trusted the jerk who harmed him with helping him. What's wrong with me? What's wrong with everyone? Why doesn't anyone care about my dad? Why doesn't anyone care about me? I could have been a better daughter to him. I could have visited more, called more, involved him in things more. I could have chased him when he left my apartment. I might have gotten hurt, but I would rather be beaten to a pulp than be sitting in a hospital room with my unconscious and probably dying father. I'm so fucking stupid. I'm sorry, Dad. Relevant comments. Any chance your dad and aunt were having an affair and your uncle caught them? This is a heavily downvoted comment. I don't know. Maybe they were having an affair, but I doubt it. My dad and uncle have been in physical fights pretty regularly since childhood. It's their go-to solution for literally anything. When I was a kid, I watched my dad reel back and punch my uncle in the chest for stealing a lighter. My guess is something equally ridiculous happened, and they fought like they usually do, but they're getting up in years and can't take the kind of punishment they used to. Comment exchange. Commenter, I know you're hurting, but please stop threatening hospital employees. They're just trying to do their job. Ope, I only yelled at the receptionist, and I apologized later after I had cooled down. I'm not mad at the doctors or nurses. I'm mad at my uncle and aunt and pretty much everyone else. The only people who seem to care about my dad at all are the hospital staff, and I'm really grateful for them. I promise I'm being as nice and understanding as physically possible and apologizing when my tone gets a little too harsh. Talk to the police or start with a hospital social worker. A social worker did come talk to me after my uncle left, but it didn't seem like they were listening. I'll try and get someone to talk to me again since I'm sure my dad wasn't slamming painkillers like candy on his own. Calling the cops on your uncle is totally justified, especially because of the painkillers. He could be on the hook for homicide. 100% think this is why they waited so long and pumped him full of painkillers. They hoped it would just go away, and even when they brought him here, they kept everyone in the dark, hoping the doctors would just magically fix him and everyone could go home and forget about it. Did the doc give any medical terminology terminology for his condition? Kind of. I told him to dumb it down for me since I have no medical knowledge at all. I'm a line cook at Denny's for fuck's sake. But he said massive concussion, brain damage, nerve damage, and cell death. He then said it's pretty bad, and I shouldn't get my hopes up for recovery. He looked like he was about to throw up telling me that, so I'm going to assume my dad probably won't last long. Try to give yourself kindness and grace. This isn't your fault. Thank you. I'm really trying to remind myself I did everything I could, but it feels like I could have done more. It always feels like that, though. No matter what you do, it feels like it's not good enough in the face of something like this. I talked to the social worker here, and they didn't seem like they were listening, but I'll push harder when they come back around again. Did the doc say your dad's injury was consistent with a fall? I did ask if my uncle's story lined up with my dad's head, but the doctor just said it was an impact wound, whatever that means. He couldn't confirm or deny anything, and I totally understand that. He's not a cop and can't really tell me anything about that. Update. On this, a couple cops just came to talk to me and get a statement. They seemed to be taking me seriously and took my contact info. I told them everything about what happened when Dad came to my apartment and what my uncle said and how I didn't believe him and gave my version of things. Tried to give as much context as I could. I think they believed me, but who knows? They said they'd come around again soon. I'm not really sure what happens from here, but I'll be pressing for more information when they come back. Additional information. There aren't any saints here. Even my siblings and myself aren't completely innocent. Mom and Dad were married up until the recession in 2008. I think the divorce came around 2010, but I can't remember. Exactly. Up until the economy crashed, their marriage was fine. But then bills got higher and their pay got lower, and they went from never fighting about anything to fighting about money. Who spent it, why they were spending it, if it was worth it, etc. I remember a fairly hefty argument about my dad smoking more cigarettes than he was allowed when they were too strapped for cash to buy enough for both of them. Money arguments never really get resolved. They just fizzle out until the next one. There was never any violence from my dad, but my brother says he once saw my mom open hand smack my dad across the face during a fight. Knowing my mom, I highly doubt she did it for fun, and I'm sure my dad said something to provoke such an extreme reaction, but I wasn't there and didn't witness it. My dad was quite selfish during this period and would purchase things for himself when Mom and we needed that money more. It was only small things, but it adds up. An energy drink here, an extra pack of cigarettes there, a new pocket knife or cap, whatever little thing he needed to not harm himself. They were both so strapped during the divorce that there wasn't really anything to divide, just us kids. Mom got us in the divorce and my dad just kind of drifted away for most of my teenage years. He turned into the phones work both ways kind of dad, but he did show up at events and holidays, so he wasn't completely absent. It hit my brother pretty hard, and I do remember him crying late at night asking why our dad didn't love him anymore. He's my dad's only son, and he got a lot of special father-son time when Dad was still living in the house. Mom didn't make it easy for Dad to see us, though. She insisted that if he wanted to see us, he needed to take us somewhere, and when you're broke, taking 3 kids out for dinner or a movie is tough. I know he tried, but I also know he could have tried harder. Mom took every opportunity to crap on him for being broke, but we were broke too, so it always had that stink of spite, but still got in our heads anyway. My sister doesn't really even remember our dad living at home, so her attachment to him is pretty minimal. My brother remembers, but also harbors that resentment about Dad just kind of disappearing from his life and never rekindling that special bond they had. Dad couch hopped for some time until he landed employment and rented a townhouse in a decent area. I think I was around 17 when that occurred. My brother had already moved out of the house by then, and I was about to leave as well, but I did visit a few times, and it appeared as though Dad was really rebuilding his life. He contacted us more often, invited us over frequently, and made an effort. Eventually, something happened with the townhouse. Possibly, the rent became too much for him since the area transitioned from nice to affluent nice, and he moved in with my aunt and uncle. The effort pretty much ceased after that. From what I understand about my dad, I believe he was embarrassed by his financial situation and didn't want his children to see him that way. I stayed in touch with him, but my brother gave up after he moved to another state, and my sister never really had much contact with him to begin with. No one really won or lost in this situation. My mom did well for herself. She actually owns her house, which is something none of us expected to happen in our family. We've always been below the poverty line, and owning a house is a huge deal. There's a lot more drama, but this is the essence.